What's up YouTube? As you can hear, the speaker on my MacBook Pro has gone defunct, so I'm going to replace it. Here is my MacBook Pro. It's a 2015 model, so it's quite old. It's what, 8 years old. However, it was top of the range spec when it was new, so it's still absolutely fine, and it's what I'm going to be editing this video on as soon as I've finished repairing it. I'm going to swap out the battery as well. Now what I've got, the easiest way to do this is a donor. This is actually the laptop that the screen for my laptop came from, because I don't buy things new. New from Apple, this was about £3,000 in 2015. However, I paid like £100 for it, I think, because it had a smashed screen and it didn't work, so I repaired it. That's what I do. Most of the stuff I have, I bought broken and fix it. So yes, so this is actually the donor laptop that the screen came from. There's a problem with the main motherboard, so I'm going to take the battery and the speakers out of it and swap them into the line. Service recommended battery. And if we look in here, we've got a cycle count of 361 charges. Yeah, I don't know what the other one is. It's about 100, I think, which is much better. So hopefully this will last a bit longer than the half an hour it lasts at the minute. It also runs a bit hot, so I'm going to possibly replace the thermal paste on the heat sinks on the processor and the graphics chips, to try and stop the fans from going crazy most of the time whilst I'm editing videos. So as we can see, it's a pretty high spec. I mean, it's a 2.8 quad-core i7 processor, 16 gig of RAM, and it's got 2 gig of graphics individual memory as well. So yeah. Oh, it's got 2 graphics chips. So you've got like an onboard one built into the processor, and you've got a separate one on this model. So it's more than capable in 2023 of editing videos. And that's mainly why I don't really want to spend loads of money buying a new laptop, because this one's perfectly fine. So without further ado, let's get the tools out. So, first things first, we need to undo all the screws on the bottom. Now there's a couple missing on this, but never mind. Now, being Apple, they are pentalobe screws. If you can see, there is 5 points. They're not Allen keys, they're not crossheads, flatheads, pentalobe. So you will need a pentalobe screwdriver. So we'll just pop all these out. They are tiny. Now on this particular model, all the screws are exactly the same. However, other models, sometimes these two can be longer, the ones near the hinge. So just watch out for that. So once you've undone all the screws, this back cover on this particular model just pops off. Other models, you do have to sort of pull the cover this way and then lift it off. Some of them you kind of pry it from different corners. They're all different, but this one is one of the easiest ones. So the first thing we are going to do is disconnect the battery, which means peeling back this, grabbing a splodger and just popping that guy off there. So on this particular model, speakers are here and here. Now I'm only actually going to change the left speaker, which is actually this speaker. Slight change of plans. What I'm actually going to do is use this bottom case. I'm going to keep the battery, keep these 2 speakers, and take out the logic board and put my screen on this casing. So to do this, I'm going to undo every screw that I can find. Now the screws in these are normal Torx. So once the 3 screws are out, we need to undo the electrical connector. Popping that lid up, and then it will just come out like so, and then peel this off, and then the fan will come out. Now what I do, I put the screws on the counter in the same orientation that they came out, because if you notice, they are all different. Same on this side, but we've got to remove this cable first by undoing these 2 covers. And then, as before, pop the covers and the screws all in the same orientation. And the same with the right hand fan. Now next I'm going to pop out the SSD, which is the solid state hard drive. undo the trackpad, and then one by one I'm going to go around unplugging everything I can find. So that's everything unplugged. Now I'm going to find all the screws. This little board is separate. This doesn't need to come out. Annoyingly, this board does have to come out because I can't get the heatsink out from underneath this bit of plastic. Ah, sneaky. I'm just going to pop this little guy out as well. It's the charging port, and I know there's a cable connected from that to the main board. It's just easier to undo these two screws and take them out together. Now with a spot of luck, it should come out quite nicely. There we go. Wicked. Just pop that to one side on some anti-static bubble wrap. So the donor unit is now ready for my logic board and, well, motherboard, mainboard, and my monitor, my screen. So let's get the board back in. Assembly is reversal of removal, and we just need to remember little guys like this and this little guy here. Make sure they don't get trapped under the board. This guy, obviously, this little guy, that's from the speaker. So as you can see, you would actually have to take the board out to replace the speaker anyway, because it goes underneath the board. But because I've got this lovely donor unit with a good battery in it, I'm just going to put my board in here. So now I need to take this one apart, which is my laptop, so I have to be extra careful with this one. You don't need to watch me do this again, so I'm just going to crack on. So with the other one, I didn't realise, but looking at, you know what I said about these two screws can sometimes be different? Well, they are. Look, they're half the length of the other ones. Oh my, this is dusty. This might be why the fans are going nuts. Well, I think I'll put those ones in. I'll clean them out as well. So this battery is actually not glued down because it's not the original. It's an eBay special, and although it's okay, it's not fantastic. So we've got a couple of extra things to remove this time. The antennas for the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, which run into the screen, and obviously the screen we have to take off, along with this cable. This is what sends the image from the computer to the screen. Now the first time you take a laptop apart or a phone apart or anything of that kind of nature, it is a bit daunting and scary, but I've done this sort of thing millions of times, so I'm pretty happy. Ugh. So common problem with laptops, because they're literally on your lap, in the bed or whatever, these are heat sinks. Yeah, so the fan blows on the heatsink is connected to the processor and the graphics chip, and keeps them cool. Now, if the heatsink is all clogged up with fluff, and the fan, as you can see here, is all clogged up with fluff, it won't cool the chips properly, and it'll end in basically breaking, because it will get too hot. In all fairness, you should periodically, maybe once a year, just pop the back off your laptop and give it a good clean. Now these little guys pop off from this side, yeah? So just get your something underneath there and they just pop off. Now when you put them on, you have to put this side in first. It's quite hard to demonstrate. They are tiny, obviously you can see the size of my finger. When you're doing something like this, just take your time. Take lots of photos so you know exactly what goes where and what order you took things apart in, basically. And as long as you're careful, you know, nothing will break and it will work fine when you put it back together. Some things like this might be glued on, yeah, so just carefully peel things. Now I'm actually going to leave this guy stuck to the speaker. just because he's stuck on there, it doesn't need to come off. Top tip with the motherboard screws, right? If you lay them out like I've done here, yeah, they're in exactly the same order and kind of position on the motherboard, just placed on the tables. When I put them back in, that's the same way they go back in, basically. Does that make sense? So before I take this board out, I'm going to pop off this heatsink and refresh the thermal paste that acts as a heat transfer paste between the heatsink and the microchips. Now you've got to be real careful when you undo these clamps because, well, you'll see. Press down as you do it and then they're sprung loaded. And obviously place them down on the table with the screws in the same orientation that they went in. Pop that one in there. So this will be stuck on. You have to give it a bit of a tug. No, I just did it off camera, annoyingly. Right, now as you can see, this thermal paste has dried up and it is not performing as it should be. So let's clean it off and replace it. Now ideally you'd want to use IPA, not Indian Pale Ale, as in isopropyl alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol to clean the heatsink and the chips, and then apply the paste and put it back together. And blow out any fluff that's in here. So as you can see, this thermal paste is not a paste anymore. It's kind of solidified. But as a result of that, it actually comes off really easily. And when it comes to cleaning the chips, now I'm using toilet roll, admittedly. Ideally cotton buds, they're pretty good. Just be careful not to damage anything. You know, you can be relatively not rough, but you know they're not going to scratch. So, well, they might scratch. Just be careful. So there we go. Now we've cleaned all the stuff off the chips, all the stuff off the heatsink, and we'll apply the thermal paste to the chips and screw that back on. Now, you do not need a lot. You basically want a P in the middle of the chip, like so. And we'll put a little bit on there. Yeah, that is literally all you need. And then same for the graphics chip. In all fairness, that might be a little bit much, but hey ho. Try not to get this on your fingers or your clothes, because it tends to not come off very easily. And then carefully, very carefully, if you line up the holes with the heatsink, pop it on, there we go, and then put all the screws back in, and that clamp that was across there. So with this clamp, tighten one end, as I've done there, and then you can push that down and pop that in. Cool. Oakley dokley. So with that done, let's why won't he come out? There we go. Let's take him out and pop him in the other case. So when doing this, obviously reminder, just make sure that you don't trap any of these underneath the board. Yeah, just it can be quite fiddly, but it's not too taxing. Sometimes when there's like 20 of them, I'll get some insulation tape and just tape them out the way. But I don't think I need to on this one because there's only what, 4 or 5. Right, so he's in, and then it's just a case of what I tend to do is put the screws in, put all the ribbon cables in first, because then I'll know if I've trapped one underneath the board prior to screwing the board in, because you can obviously damage them if you do that. So I'm going to go around and put all these back in, and sometimes it's easier to do it when you're not holding a camera in your hand. This particular style just literally pushes in, he says, line it up, and then push it in. And then we've got another one of those around here. And then this little guy at the front, he just pushes on. I wonder if I use this, you can see what I'm doing. There we go, nice little click. And the one for the trackpad. Obviously we'll leave the battery one out, this guy. Voila. Oh, I just spat all over that. It's clean though. Now the fans are refurbished. I find it easier to plug the cable in first and then push it down and put the screws in. So with all the cables plugged back in, fans back in, I'm now going to put all the screws back in that order. Top tip, when you're putting little boards back in like this with USB sockets on, if you pop in a cable, then it will make sure it lines up so you don't screw it in and then you can't plug a cable in because it's not quite perfect. You might have noticed I took the fan out because I forgot to put that board back in. So there we go, that's all back together. We just now need to take the screen off of the other unit. Now this is actually really easy on this 2015 model. The later models, there's loads of tiny little screws you need to undo, but the easiest way to do this, open the laptop up, hang the screen off the edge of the table like so. Now it needs to open all the way, and then we're going to undo these 3 screws and these 3 screws. There is 2 tiny little hook clamp things you need to take off, one there and one there. And now it should, yep, there we go. And then obviously assembly is reversal of removal. You know what, I might put the camera down to do this. Right, screws back in. Now we just need to put the cables back in. So that one is relatively easy, yeah, and then the little clamp goes down. But these guys are very fiddly, so let's put that guy in. There we go, he's in. I mean, probably don't use what I'm using. And then these guys, okay, they do just push on there. Make sure they're lined up before you push them on, else they're going to break. Now what you can do to test that you've got it on right is move the wire, yeah, left to right, and see if the connector stays on there, because they should be able to freely spin like that, see? So you should be able to do that without coming off. So, yep, win. Let's not forget about these little hooky claw things. And there we go, finished. Right, so we pop the battery back on, like so. Now I'm going to put the cover back on. Ready? Needs a wipe first. That's better. Ta-da! Right, now there are 2 little clips on the inside of this, so listen. There we go. And now I'll put the screws back in, remembering that these 2 were the 2 smaller screws. Right, so don't worry that there's loads of screws and bits and pieces left over, because they're from the other laptop, so I will put that back together so I don't lose any of it. Right, let's see if it charges at least and turns on and works. Oh, green light. Orange light, excellent. Orange means charging. It's oh, it's just comes alive, and there we go. Wicked. So it is now running at a much cooler temperature. The battery no longer says what did it say before? service battery or something. However, it is flat as a pancake. And the cycle count's a little bit higher than I thought it was, but the condition is normal, and it is a genuine original Apple battery, so should be all good. That sounds a million times better. No more distorted speaker. Yeah, now I can get on with editing this video. And there we have it. I hope you found this video interesting and it wasn't too boring for you, because obviously my normal stuff is cars. But if you did like it and you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give me a like if you liked it, obviously. And I'll see you next time. Cheers!